Before any of this, you are a flight instructor at a small regional airfield outside Culiacán, charging 400 pesos an hour to teach nervous accountants and bored ranchers how to keep a Cessna 172 level at altitude. You are 31 years old, you have 4,000 logged hours, a commercial license, and a salary that keeps your mother's house from falling into the bank's hands, but does not do much else. You eat lunch from a cart outside the hangar. You go home to a one-room apartment where the ceiling fan wobbles on its mount. You are not unhappy, exactly. You are something smaller than that. You are simply waiting, though you have not named it that way to yourself. The shift happens on a Tuesday in March, the way most irreversible things happen, quietly, without ceremony. A man named Rogelio, who you know only as someone who once rented hangar space for a Piper Seneca he never actually flew, sits across from you at the lunch cart and tells you that he has an offer. He does not dress it up. He tells you the figure, not monthly, weekly, and you laugh because it sounds like a number from a different conversation, a conversation happening in a different country between different people. He does not laugh back. He slides a phone across the table with a photograph on the screen. It is your mother's house, taken recently from close enough that you can see the crack in the front gate you have been meaning to repair. He is not threatening you, he says. He is simply showing you that the people he works for pay attention. They have been watching you for 8 months. They know your license class, your instrument rating, your hours in low visibility conditions. They know you once landed a student's plane on a dirt road during an engine failure without a single scratch on the fuselage. They want someone who does not panic. You ask what happens if you say no. He picks up the phone, stands, and tells you to think about it overnight. There is only one answer, and you both know it, but he is giving you the dignity of the night. You do not sleep. You lie on your back and stare at the wobbling fan and run the numbers and the risks and the moral arithmetic of it, and by 4 a.m, you have arrived at the place you are always going to arrive, survival dressed as choice. You call him at dawn. You say yes. The first 6 months, you fly support routes. Nothing primary, nothing heavy. You ferry mechanics, carry documents, move equipment between landing strips that do not exist on any map. The strips themselves are your first real education. They are carved into mountain clearings, dry riverbeds, narrow ranch roads where the cattle have been moved to the far pasture for the afternoon. You learn that a grass strip with a 2-degree slope behaves differently at altitude than at sea level, that a crosswind of 12 knots means something entirely different when your runway is 400 meters and ends in a tree line. You learn to read ground by moonlight, the way pale caliche soil reflects differently than dark clay, the way a kerosene lantern placed at the threshold of a strip casts exactly enough light to judge your flare if you know where to look for it. Nobody teaches you this formally. You teach yourself, the way anyone learns things that cannot be written down, by doing them in the dark and not dying. By the end of the first year, they trust you with cargo. The first time, the load is modest, 40 kilograms packed into false fuel tank liners, distributed carefully so the weight sits within the aircraft's center of gravity envelope. You have been given a route briefing by a man who introduces himself only as the coordinator, who speaks in terms of time windows and frequency bands, and checkpoints identified by natural landmarks rather than coordinates. There are no GPS waypoints filed anywhere. There is no flight plan. You exist for the duration of this flight as a ghost in the sky. This is the first time you understand the specific quality of fear that will become the background noise of your life from here forward. Not the sharp fear of immediate danger, but the low, constant pressure of operating entirely outside the boundary of any system that could help you if something goes wrong. The radar picture in northwestern Mexico and across the transit corridors is not a simple thing, and learning it becomes your obsession the way weather systems once were. You spend months accumulating the knowledge piece by piece, from the coordinator, from other pilots you are occasionally introduced to at remote airstrips, from your own observations. The DEA operates tethered aerostat radar systems, the large balloon-mounted units that float above forward operating locations and provide low-altitude coverage over corridors and border approaches. Their coverage is not uniform. It has edges, gaps, terrain shadows. The mountains create radar blind spots the way they create weather, predictably if you know the geometry. A ridge of sufficient height, oriented correctly relative to a ground radar installation, will mask an aircraft flying at the right altitude on the right bearing. You learn these corridors the way you once learned instrument approach procedures, by studying them until they are reflexive, until the geometry lives in your body and not just your mind. There are also timing windows. Radar systems require maintenance. Operators work shifts. There are patterns in enforcement posture that reveal themselves over months of observation, not because anyone briefs you on DEA schedules, but because the organization has people watching, always watching, and the information filters to you through the coordinator in the form of updated route cards and time on departure windows that shift by 20 or 40 minutes without explanation. You learn not to ask for explanations. You learn to trust the windows and fly them precisely. The aircraft change. After 18 months, you transition to a twin-engine Aerostar, faster and with better range, capable of carrying 400 kilograms in properly distributed loads without handling changes significant enough to betray cargo to a casual observer. You fly it at between 300 and 500 feet above ground level on the transit legs, below the floor of most radar coverage, threading terrain that most pilots would not attempt in daylight, let alone at night. You are not reckless. Recklessness is for people who do not understand the consequences. You are precise. You fly the route at altitude and daylight first, memorizing the terrain, cataloging the obstacles, identifying the decision points where a turn must be initiated within seconds or the ridge becomes a wall. Then you fly it at night, slowly building the picture. Then you fly it with cargo. The psychological architecture of this work is something no one prepares you for. In the cockpit, flying a no-radar corridor at low level in darkness, there is a quality of concentration that erases everything else. Your mother's house, the crack in the gate, the face of the man at the lunch cart. There is only the terrain-following scan, the altimeter cross-check, the engine instruments, the timing. You are not at peace, exactly, but you are fully present in a way that your old life never demanded. It is not until you are on the ground in the hours after a run that the rest of it returns. What you are carrying, who it will reach, what it will become when it dissolves into a city somewhere, and what that means, and whether meaning is a luxury you have already surrendered. You have been flying cargo for 3 years when you have your first real emergency in the corridor. The left engine on the Aerostar begins running rough over the most technically demanding segment of the route, 60 kilometers of mountain terrain, no flat ground within gliding distance, the ridge corridor so narrow that an immediate diversion is not simply difficult, but geometrically impossible for the next 12 minutes. You have rehearsed single-engine procedures until they are mechanical, until your hands move before your thoughts. But the rehearsal always assumed flat terrain and daylight, and the option of a declared emergency with a tower that could vector you to a runway. None of those things exist tonight. What exists is the decision tree, compressed to seconds. Assess severity, identify the options, execute the best one. The engine is not failing, it is running rough, losing power incrementally. You reduce power on it, increase on the right, adjust trim, recalculate the terrain clearance on the degraded performance profile, and fly the next 12 minutes with a precision that narrows your entire life to the space between your hands and the instrument panel. When you clear the ridge and the ground falls away below you and a flat valley opens ahead, you allow yourself one exhaled breath. You bring the aircraft down onto the receiving strip on one engine, roll to the end, and shut down. Your hands are completely steady. You notice this about yourself with something that is not pride, but is adjacent to it, a cold acknowledgement that you have become, without planning to, very good at this. The organization evolves around you, and you evolve with it. By your 4th year, you are not simply a pilot, you are a route architect, consulted on new corridors, asked to evaluate strips, brought into planning conversations with the coordinator, and once with a man senior enough that the coordinator himself is visibly differential. You train 2 other pilots carefully and without ever writing anything down, passing on the terrain geometry and the timing windows and the low-level scan technique. You are aware that this deepens your entanglement in a way that is not reversible. A pilot can theoretically stop flying. A pilot who has trained others, who holds route knowledge, who has sat in planning rooms, that person does not exit. You understood this when you accepted the training role, and you accepted it anyway, because the alternative was being considered expendable, and expendable people in this organization have a specific and documented fate. The money has accumulated in ways that required solving problems you were not prepared for. You have a legitimate flight school now, purchased through a process the coordinator arranged, which employs 3 actual instructors and generates actual revenue and provides a surface explanation for your income that is coherent to anyone who looks at it from the outside. Your mother's house has been repaired, the gate, the roof, the plumbing, and she believes this is the flight school's doing, and you have not corrected this belief because correcting it would require a conversation that cannot happen. You have built a life that looks, from the correct angle, entirely ordinary. This is its own kind of skill, and it costs more than the flying does. There are nights in the planning phase of a route when you are alone with a topographic chart and a calculation pad, when you allow yourself to consider the people downstream of the cargo, not abstractly, not as a policy question, but specifically, someone's son, someone's daughter, a specific person in a specific city making a specific decision that your flight made possible. You do not know how to carry this weight, so mostly you do not carry it. You set it down in a place you do not look at, and you focus on the chart, the terrain, the timing window. This is a moral strategy of a kind, though not one you would describe that way. It is survival of a different type than the low-level flying, survival of the self that existed before the lunch cart, the photograph, the crack in the gate. Tonight, you are in the pre-flight phase of a route that carries the largest load you have moved, 700 kilograms, packed and balanced and signed off by the coordinator. The aircraft is a modified Cessna Caravan, single turboprop, fitted with extended range tanks, and a cargo floor that betrays nothing to anyone who is not looking for it. The weather window is tight. There is a front moving through the target corridor that will close the route in approximately 4 hours, and your block time is 3 hours 40 minutes if everything goes correctly, which means the margin is 20 minutes, and you know from 4 years of experience that 20 minutes is not a margin, it is an optimistic fiction. You are going to fly it anyway. You are going to fly it because the coordinator has told you the window is this or nothing, and nothing has its own consequences. You are sitting in the aircraft now, running through the checklist, and the turboprop spins up and the sound fills the cockpit, and the familiar narrowing begins, the compression of your entire consciousness down to the sequence of tasks that will carry you through the next 4 hours. The strip lights click on ahead of you. 300 meters of pale caliche, then darkness. You release the brakes, the aircraft accelerates, and you run the numbers in your head without thinking about it, the way you used to run approach plates. And the mains lift at exactly the calculated speed, and the strip disappears below you, and you begin the climbing right turn that puts you on course for the first terrain waypoint. And the mountain rises ahead in the darkness, and you know every feature of it, every shadow and slope and narrow gap, and you fly into it the way water finds the path it has already made, without hesitation, without question, with only the precise and necessary forward motion of someone who has gone too far in one direction to consider the other. Somewhere behind the ridge, a front is building faster than the forecast said it would. You have checked the weather twice in the last hour, and the numbers have been moving, and the margin that was 20 minutes may now be less, and you will not know how much less until you are already committed to the corridor, already past the point where turning back is an option your fuel load supports. This is the decision you live inside now. Not a single choice, but a continuous state. A life made of margins that keep narrowing, of routes that keep asking for more precision than the last one, of a version of yourself that is highly capable and completely trapped, and flying, always flying, into the part of the sky where no one is watching and no one will know whatever happens next.